and we were going to be talking about how to secure humans. We were talking in the green room, and I feel like we could have been in there for another 15 minutes talking. However, we're going to talk about humans. They are really that last line of defense in cybersecurity warfare, and yet humans are impulsive and emotional. We all are sometimes a little bit illogical, and sometimes we forget the things that we've been trained on. We forget things that we should know better, and yet we do them anyway. So how do you strengthen this inherent weakness? And should you even try? That's what we're going to be digging in here today. And I'm here with several of my go-to experts on this topic. And I'm a big believer that if we get enough smart people in the room, we might just be able to solve almost any problem in the world. So I'm going to hand this off first over to Kyle. And then Kyle, tell us who you are, what you do. We're going to go around the horn, and then we're going to get started into our content for the day.
Thanks, Jennifer. My name is Kyle Spooner. I am Director of Operations for Telecom Technologies, an MSP based out of Baltimore, Maryland. I'm also Vice President of MSP Geek. For those who are familiar with that community, it's free to join. And that's me. I've been doing this for 13 years, not 10 years, excuse me. I don't want to add more time than I don't have. Reg?
Yeah, let me add the time. So Reg Harnish, currently founder and CEO at Orbital Fire. Many years ago, was also a founder and CTO at Autotask, spent about 10 years there. And then about 10 years after that, was also the founder of Grey Castle Security, a big enterprise cybersecurity professional services firm.
Awesome. Jimmy?
Hi, my name is Jimmy Hansel. I'm the VP of Revenue at QuickPass Cybersecurity, previously with Barracuda and Scout Cybersecurity, and I also worked in internal IT as an IT director in my past life. So experience on both sides of the fence as a vendor and, practitioner, I guess.
Awesome. All right.
Hand it over to Connor.
Hi, I'm Connor. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fin Security. Been learning about humans and security awareness and how to recognize social engineering for almost 4 years now. So not quite as long as Kyle, but I don't have any gray hair yet. And doesn't look like he does either, but he has a few years on me for sure.
For sure. Okay. And I was warned that we may have fist fights break out, which will be really interesting because we're all in different locations of the world. But somehow I feel like you guys may figure out how to argue with each other. And that's okay. I am a mom with 3 boys and a husband. So I am really good at breaking up fights. I may just let it run for a while just to see what comes out of the conversation. But I want to start with what I hinted at the beginning, which is, should we even try? So we're talking about humans and human security and how humans are that last line of defense. I sometimes say they're the weakest link because they can't be automated. Do we even try? And I'm going to pose this question to each of you. Let me start with Kyle. We don't have to go in order necessarily, but Kyle, do we try to secure the humans?
Yeah, we try. There's not a whole lot that is done that's effective, though. I mean, security awareness training's okay, but that doesn't cover a lot of aspects that are currently problematic. Like, there's no specific training on security for MSP technicians, for instance, right? It's there's no you have to build policy and procedure around that. If someone calls in for a password reset, how does that work? That's just like you don't have that mindset of, is this person, like, your immediate first thought should be, this is a security issue, I should defend myself and start asking questions to pose that. That training doesn't happen unless you do it specifically internally, and no one does it specifically internally.
Okay, so you would argue that the training needs to come from internal, which I like, but you would say there's not really any training that's effective. So Connor, yeah. Let me bounce that over to you, because you may have an opinion. Jimmy, I saw you smile. We'll come to you next, and then we'll circle back to Reg.
So your first question, Jen, should we try? As long as humans are doing a lot of work, of course we have to try. We're a part of, humans are in most cases the largest part of an organization, and you called it not only the weakest link but also the greatest benefit to organizations. I think actually what Kyle said is accurate. I think training needs to move in a few different directions. I think teaching people to recognize what's going on around them and how they're vulnerable to social engineering specifically has started and stopped at an email assessment and a training video, sometimes not even delivered well, for 25 years now. Like, that's literally been no innovation in the way we help secure humans. Now you can add like technology on top of that, and you can add things that make it way easier to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, according to like Verizon's data breach and investigations report, 82% of breaches involve a human doing a thing they shouldn't have or making a mistake. So to Kyle's point, it's like, okay, well, what training could we have given, or what would that person have needed to think when they're going through that experience to do the right thing or to recognize that something wrong was occurring? So I think something else is needed for sure.
Yes. Okay. So hold that thought, because I want to get back to that trigger point. Like, how do we get our humans to think differently? So we'll get to that in a minute. Jimmy, I saw you smile at something that Kyle said. I don't know if that was in agreement or if you had a little bit of a different perspective.
No, it's just like when we're talking about MSPs, like, level 1 help desk technicians and training for them, just the amount of security related tasks that have been put on MSP employees has just exploded over the past couple of years. And part of it is because MSPs are being responsible for more security than they ever have before in the past. And then the other part of it is because the attack surface is just so much bigger and there's more attacks happening. So it's just happening more where, maybe you had, one ransomware attack a year and, you can kind of go back to your backups. Now it's, devastating stuff happening all the time in the industry. So it's kind of funny. It's a symptom of a larger problem and a macro thing happening to the MSP industry. So I definitely agree with Kyle, and that's why I smirked up a little bit there.
All right, Reg, how about you?
Sure. So, I think the obvious answer, people are one of the most significant and present resources in an organization. So I think to ignore them from a risk standpoint doesn't really make sense. I think the bigger question is who should be trying? If you look at the failures or really the lack of progress that we've seen since phishing and awareness training came about, probably, I don't know, it predates me 15, 20 years. The reason we haven't made progress is the who, because it's been security and IT nerds trying to do behavioral, cognitive bias, behavioral stuff. And that just does not work. It would be like having your landscaper come and do your dentistry. And so if we've been sitting around for a long time wondering what's going on. Is it the content? Is it the approach? Is it the messaging? But it's not. It's all of the above. And we've done a poor job because we've been, as an industry, if you look back even 20 years ago when managed services was really invented, since that day, the big vendors in this space have continuously pushed more and more accountability and stuff into MSPs. Customers have demanded more of MSPs. And I think this cycle has gotten really out of control to a point where MSPs are overwhelmed. Many of them don't want to do cybersecurity, but they feel like they're being dragged into it. And there's no other answers. But I think we need to figure out how to shift the accountability for awareness and behavioral change, which is in decision making, which is truly what we're really looking at here, back to folks who are experts in behavioral change, like psychologists and perhaps a human resources department. As long as MSPs are attempting to do, things that are really shouldn't be expected of them, honestly, we're probably going to continue to fail.
I mean, to highlight a point you said, the focus, when I was coming up in the MSP industry 10 years ago, it was before the big cloud backup boom, when Datto hit the market and everyone was like, cloud backups and network backups, and it was fantastic. And then we moved from that to security, but the focus hasn't been on the person. The focus has been on EDR, XDR, AV, hardware, firewalls. It's been technology and not the person. We haven't had someone come and focus and be like, the real problem is the person behind the keyboard, because no matter what, you can put no admin credentials, you can put no firewall, you could have the best security in the world, layered like the thickest onion you could ever imagine, and that person is going to be like, I need to do this, and someone's going to let them do it. And that's no one's focused on that point. I mean, we trust people to handle multi-million-dollar businesses that can't buy a house because their credit score's 250, but yet they have the credit card of the company and they have wiring ability, and it's amazing.
And then circling back to no real policies in place around the wire transfers, or no training in place. And Reg, I love how you said, each one of you said, we need to be training, we need to be teaching. But as I was hearing that, Reg, I was glad you brought out the point. Like, we're asking managed service providers or even vendors who are providing services to MSPs to know about education, to know about the psychology of the user, to understand the psychology of the threat actor or the phishing attack. Like, this is a very complex problem to be solved, and anything in cybersecurity is complex, but it's so complex because it's multifaceted. It really is its own onion, to borrow that phrase. And then we're inserting on top of that complexity the expectation that the end user will make the right choice if they have been instructed correctly and they remember, and that training was, memorable, etc. So how do you put programs in place, and probably more importantly, how do you measure their effectiveness?
Can I just jump in real quick, because something just happened like while we're on this stream, and I didn't like stage this at all, but I just got a vishing text right now. Someone
that was me, Jimmy.
That was you. I
trying to get a point, Jimmy.
Yeah. So like, this is real. Like, this is 9 minutes ago that this came. We started this 13 minutes ago. So while we were on this stream, someone sent this message impersonating the CEO.
They saw you. They saw you talking to us. Like, you know what I'll do? I'm gonna embarrass Jimmy on the stream. We're gonna.
But I think the counter to that, and something that we often don't think about, and let me just make a bigger point, is that Jimmy got one vish in the last 13 minutes, but your network was probably port swept 100,000 times. We don't think about this. So we have this axiom that I think we need to rethink and refactor, because this idea that humans are the weakest link is really very problematic for us. And in fact, half of me agrees with it, but not in the way that others present it. So if a user opens a compromised attachment, a phishing link, something like that, they fall victim to a social engineering attack, that means a whole bunch of technology has already failed. Way before the user even sees that or experiences that. Now, so in that sense, I disagree wholeheartedly that people are the weakest link. However, let's remember, it was people that wrote sloppy code or misconfigured an edge spam filter or lots of other things. I do agree that all risks come down to a human being, but many of them are upstream or downstream of clicking a link. This idea that people failing or falling victim to social engineering is the greatest weakness. The entire industry is just off center on this, and the fact that Verizon is perpetuating this is really problematic, because now we're putting even more and more pressure on the existing people who are probably part of the problem to solve the problem. And again, I think it comes back to this frustration that we're just not making progress. There's lots of activity and not a lot of progress.
So maybe they're just the easiest scapegoats. Well, you click the link, and so I'm very.
They're the last.
Right.
The last part of that compromise chain, right? So
so I'm very contrarian when I'm watching sports. Someone will say, "Oh, so and so scored a touchdown." Well, that is true, but it took the entire team to move the ball all the way down to the point where he was able to score the touchdown, and so he gets all the credit, but it really was a team effort. And so I'm hearing the inverse of that, is that the human never would have had a chance to respond to social engineering or click a phishing link had the other layers not failed. But that's an uncomfortable truth for managed service providers to say, well, all the other things I put in place were not successful. It's uncomfortable, but it is the reality. That is, look at the NIST framework. There is a reason there's a respond, recover. It's because there is an expectation that there is no foolproof anything. There is no technology that's foolproof, just like the humans aren't foolproof. So
Yeah,
I think a lot of it is, these unfair expectations that MSPs can be experts at all of these things. Most of the MSPs that we work with are really good people, super smart, and really want to do the right thing for their customers. But I hear continuously they are just overwhelmed and burnt out because the entire industry, there's so much momentum. And I'm not going to name the big 2.5 or whatever it was now, 3, 4, but that entire industry and all of the talking heads in this industry continue to perpetuate this idea that MSPs can do more and more and more and more. Most MSPs, if you trust, industry statistics, are 3 to 5 people, and 60% of them are either at or below the survivability line, meaning they're breaking even or they're losing money. It's because the model, it's not that they're not experts. It's not that they're not capable or talented or really good people. It's that the business model is antiquated. We are operating off a business model that was invented in 2001, and we're expecting it to work, and it is fracturing now, but give it 2 years and it will collapse. Whether from legislation or the fact that MSPs are completely uninsurable at this point, or just customer dissatisfaction because expectations were out of line and the MSP didn't communicate. And meanwhile, the big K is like jamming another 12 products that they just acquired down their throats. It's just, it's dead. It's dead or dying at least.
Yeah, and stack overwhelm, just the tool, let's just throw a tool at it. And I don't hear enough about policies. And I mean, it's not necessarily a fun, sexy topic. And I don't know of many people that are selling policies. You can't exactly download a policy in a box. And so
Tim Golden is typing his response furiously right now. For sure. It's like, what do you mean? Policies are the sexiest thing I know. It's like, that's exactly what Tim's typing right now. Yeah.
All right, Kyle, you've been quiet. Is that because you agree with everything that was just said?
No. I don't think MSP is a dying industry. I don't think that we're going to crash in 2 years. I think that it's unhealthy for sure. And Reg makes great points highlighting some problems in MSPs, such as everyone does everything and everyone is spread extremely thin, which is a massive problem. MSPs can be anything and everything. The problem is most of them are set up as, here's the help desk, put the ticket on the help desk, work through it, good luck. They're not specialized. You don't have a security person who's focusing only on security. You don't have a cloud services person focusing on cloud services. You have John Doe who does security, cloud services, local Azure, local AD. They do everything, and they're supposed to remember everything, which is when you lead to that burnout, is because they're shoveled all of this content into this tiny window, and they're supposed to remember it. And throwing products at it is one method of alleviating that problem, but it's a band-aid to the core issue of not having someone specialized and being an expert in that thing. It's like with programming, right? You don't just have, like back in the day, you had a guy who knew how to program. Nowadays, you've got front end, back end, both. You got a hardware engineer who can write bytecode, and you have assembly, and you have all this niche application development, and you hire for that niche. You don't hire a programmer. I need someone to write code. Like, that's not what you look for, right? But you look for a tier 2 engineer. You look for a tier 1, tier 3 engineer. Hopefully you have all these specializations. That's the issue. And it's not, we're not broadening and identifying these niches as we grow as a company. And that's the core problem that we can't fix, which is why there's MSSPs and these vendors taking and lead generation vendors who because you don't have a salesperson, you just have a guy that does it all, right?
Mhm.
That's why these specialty vendors exist.
Okay. Jimmy, I love the smile. I'm never sure what's behind it.
Yeah,
Rage.
I gotta
Rage.
say, I disagree with Reg there. I think yes, there is a lot of people in over their head, and I sort of agree with the models dying. I think that the model of taking a product, marketing it up 40%, 60%, 80% gross margin, and then doing all of your calculations off a spreadsheet and trying to sell more products to make more profit is totally dying. But we're not just MSPs, right? Whoever, we're calling, this colloquial term for outsourced IT providers who are on the ground working with small businesses. Those people aren't just going to go away. They're not just going to go get folded into internal IT or whatever. They're always going to be needed for small businesses. So where, we can, the industry is not just going to crumble, right? A lot of these 5-person shops or, people who are running unprofitably, they're all getting bought up and rolled into an M&A. And then you have people who are breaking down more profitable, more, with longevity in their business model, and who can actually do more and handle more. And they have proper partnerships with, cybersecurity companies or whatever it is for the specialties. But I think, it's not like an industry crumbling. I think it's an industry maturing the same way, you went to 1 million healthcare outpatients, 20 years ago, and now, 3, 4, 5 hospital systems in every major area, own every single urgent care, every outpatient. It's just happening that way. And then, in those companies before, it was paper charts, just do whatever, blah, 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 blah. Now they all have Epic, and, they have you go to the specialist at the other office. So I think it's more of a symptom of the industry maturing. And you're right, though, that people who do not adapt, people who do not specialize on delivering the service of IT and cybersecurity taken care of for you and getting, the right help from the right people to do the right things. But again, the human element, not mark up a product and sell it. They're going to be okay. And the people who don't figure that out, it's going to be hard, next couple of years for them.
So
if I could, just before I get a bunch of hate mail about MSPs dying, be very clear. It's the model. MSPs, of course, and in fact, that's an industry that's going to tenfold, grow over time, just because technology is becoming so much more prevalent and just pervasive. But the idea, so I think, unfortunately, we're in violent agreement. I was going to try not to.
Violent agreement.
But
Violent agreement.
Yeah, specialization is really important here, and I think the concept of MSPs being the core through which everything goes doesn't make sense, because clearly it's not working, or the industry would be, I think, more financially viable, or at least the elements in the industry would be more financially viable. But when we think about crumbling, and what does crumbling mean? Again, let me clarify. So go back 20 years when everyone was doing break fix and managed services was born. It was really painful. I watched it firsthand. It was really painful because you had to go and completely refactor your business. You had to sell differently, price differently. Your contracts looked totally different. The people you hired was completely different. Your branding, your messaging, literally everything. If you were making that jump to managed services, everything changed. And it was really difficult for folks, especially when you think about the average MSP, the leader or leaders in that organization are experts in Windows and Cisco and lots of other things, but they're not experts in their P&L. They're not experts in brand. They're probably not experts in selling. Most MSPs hate selling, at least the ones that I have been working with. So for me, I think we're at another inflection point, just like we were with managed services, where if you want to survive and thrive in this industry, because the IT industry is going to live forever, right? But if you want to survive here, you're going to have to start thinking about your business differently. And what we offer is stop thinking about MSPs as a managed services provider, but rather a managed services partner, where you have a job, but there might be 10 other MSPs in that organization, that customer, that are specializing in their area as well. in some ways, I consider Orbital Fire an MSP. We don't do any technology, but we have built the business from the ground up to partner because we know we couldn't possibly. You don't want me configuring Intune, trust me. Like, we need help on the IT side. We don't do any technology. But we went into this knowing that we have a lane. We're really good at that lane, but we're not the experts in other lanes. And so our business is built around partnership. And I think that's the next wave of growth for this industry. I actually think it's going to grow. But I think the approach and the business model has to change radically for those that want to survive.
Okay, so then to recap, so you don't get hate mail. I'm trying to watch your back here. You're not
I'll
saying
send Reg hate mail. Everyone
Yeah,
else
I'm already
doesn't need to
typing it
send
up.
everybody
Yeah.
everybody
It's
can
too
send
late.
him hate mail as long as they understand his position, which is the model is broken or dying. So it's interesting. I'm in the middle of studying a book called Pendulum, and the whole concept is that we swing from one extreme to the other I think it's every 100 years. So at the 50-year mark, you're right at the bottom. And so it's interesting because I'm starting to hear hints of going back to consulting, which sounds an awful lot like a value-added reseller. Like, it's almost like we're heading back to that consulting angle. And so whether the model changes, there obviously IT is going to be around. There is I'm going to say always, until the robot overlords take over. There will always be a need to manage technology and to mitigate cybersecurity risks. But if we're saying the most MSPs are spread way too thin, but we do need to educate humans, and we do need to bring awareness, the whole think before you click and all of those trite sayings. Is the answer to partner with an MSSP, like a true MSSP who brings that thought leadership to the table? Connor, I'm curious your perspective on that.
There's a few things. One, I want to bring it back to a point, the security onion, and humans shouldn't be blamed for that. It's like if you had 14 lines of defenses and the last one failed as well, it means the first 13 failed. So to improperly put, if you were just doing it from a math problem, it's like, okay, maybe they deserve maybe that line of defense deserves 1/14 of the blame, not all of it. I think is a really, really healthy perspective that unfortunately most of the industry has been educated away from via the last 25 years of education. So I think it's a perspective, at least I'm trying to bring to the industry. And I know, Reg is really online with that. It sounds like everyone else here was as well, is there's a lot more than just humans making mistakes. There is an enormous amount of work that's not being done and focus that's not being provided. And I think this is where the tie-in's going to happen. I think it actually ties back to Kyle and Jimmy's point and Reg's point as well. Specialization. It's like when I first started Finn, one thing that became clear is there's a lot of IT people making content that a normal person has to digest. And I studied math in college. I know what it's like to talk to somebody about a topic I'm excited about that they couldn't care less about.
We don't need to get into math.
What?
We don't need to get into math. Like, I'm already upset you talked about fractions.
Well, I mean, you're talking to a sales trainer. Like, all of the experts would say, talk about sales. Well, MSPs, generally speaking, hate sales.
Yeah.
So yes, okay, so it's
Right.
very similar to that. Okay, so we've got IT technologists. Some of them are geeky. So finish that thought. They love talking about this. Their clients and prospects don't want to hear it.
Right. Or they're educating in the wrong ways, or they're not connecting with the people that they need to connect with in the right ways to actually create security, because it's not their expertise, it's not their focus, it's not their wheelhouse, it's not their specialization. Throw in any of those words, right? And so I think there needs to be, you mentioned, okay, does a partnership happen? Well, you have two options. Bring that expertise internally, which if MSPs are at break even or below, you don't have the money to hire that expertise. You don't have the time to hire that. You don't have any resources to do that with, pretty much. But you probably have the resources to partner with an MSSP or with an actual expert, whether that's a company or an individual or a group of people that could help you provide that. And this goes back to a conversation Reg and I have all the time offline. I think we might have had publicly a few times, is MSPs, or rather tech folk or tech companies in general, IT service providers, are almost allergic to, they're scared of that. Like, well, if I admit that I'm not the expert in this area, then my client's not going to want to work with me. While there's some truth to that, what ends up happening is if you don't admit that, the client doesn't get the right services, the breaches continue to occur, the right security doesn't get put in place, and then you end up, not providing the right services anyway. So you end up losing that relationship, or at least having a lot of friction. So
So then
partnership for sure.
So the partnership and getting to know the other experts in your community or the surrounding area, that is going to involve the MSP leaving their office and shaking hands and meeting people, which a lot of MSPs are very averse to that. They're a little more introverted. They don't like the chamber. And so therefore they don't even know the other resources in their area because they think of them as competition. So let's park there for a minute, because that's a big topic that I speak about with my clients, is the scarcity versus abundance mentality. And so if you see all the companies in your area that are doing anything related to IT or networking or cybersecurity, and you see them all as your enemy, as if they're all competitors of yours, then you will never form strategic partnerships and strategic relationships. So then if I kind of future cast, then you have a weak link that you're aware of, but you're hoping your clients aren't aware of. And then if that worst case scenario happens, you are then left to handle that incident solo when you don't have that expertise in the first place. So it is a long-term impact if you're not building those relationships. So Kyle, I saw you nodding first, and then we'll pop over to Reg because he nodded as well. So this kind of abundance mentality and forming partnerships and clearly defining swim lanes with people that you may have used to look at them as competitors. Is that something that you advocate with the people that you're talking to?
So with MSP Geek, I've had a client come into MSP Geek, like one of our MSP's clients come into the community. And that was, first off, scary, but like I still building relationships is what I like to do. I like having conversations. I like discussing things and understanding, even if you're competition, what you do, what you specialize in, because I know I may not know that. I mean, I like to surround myself with people who are better than me so that I have something to work towards. And I'm a generalist personally as far as technology goes. I know a little about a lot. And I know that if I have a security question, there's like 15 people I can go and talk to. If there's a Microsoft cloud question, there's another 15 I could go talk to. And those relationships are key in life, not just in business, because I got my current job from the community, from someone I met in the community. It's the passion that the community has, and the thing. It doesn't matter if they're competition. If you don't have that relationship with your client, you're going to lose them anyway. They're going to go find someone else. And cool. Hey, let's do a good handoff for them. Hey, look, this client has this problem. Good luck. But we wish you well. And move on with yourself and build that relationship with them, because they might have a client that might fit your need, your situation better. They may be an MSSP who specializes in security, and you've sent them a security client. They'll send you a general client. That works. That happens constantly. And if you don't build those relationships and seek out those relationships, join local events, go to community events, join other communities, you won't know that exists. You won't be able to build that partnership with someone you can just be friends with and trade business with.
So I think one piece that is important is for everyone to know that everyone has weaknesses. And so it doesn't make you less than to recognize and say, this is a blind spot for me. This is a weakness for my company. I don't have a resource who can do this. And it takes a certain level of emotional intelligence to be able to say that, a little bit of internal fortitude to say, I'm not strong in this area. This could become a huge risk to my company. And whether you're working through a SWOT analysis or what have you, to recognize this is a threat to my company. And how do I patch this hole? So it's not a software patch, but it's a business patch that's needed.
Yeah,
so
I love that. I love that concept. Yeah, the business patch. That I think that resonates. That makes a lot of sense. But also remember that this is going to happen whether MSPs evolve or not. about 50% of our business is small businesses coming directly to us, and they already have an MSP, but they are increasingly no longer going to their MSP for cybersecurity questions or requests or issues. They're doing their homework. So because we are committed to partnering with MSPs who understand us and get us and want to work in that model, that manner. But what we say to everyone else, because we scare a lot of MSPs, but what we say to them is that, listen, guys, girls, find a good cybersecurity partner before your customer does it for you. It's happening. This model, the economics of the industry and the economics are going to drive a lot of this. And so it's inevitable that MSPs will be partnering with cybersecurity firms, just like they're already partnering with AWS or a payroll organization or other stuff that's outside their specialty. So it's absolutely happening. And I think the smart MSPs are going to get ahead of this, and they're going to figure out, what are we really good at? What are we going to partner on? It's going to be different for everyone. We work with $15 million MSPs, and we work with, $500,000 MSPs. And I think it'll be very personalized, but it's happening now, and the economics are driving it.
Yeah.
All right. So go ahead. I couldn't tell who that was. Somebody said something. Jimmy?
Jimmy. Yeah. I mean, I think I agree with Reg, but I think that we are quick to say that MSPs need to work better with MSSPs or outside cyber companies. But I think is a reverse. I think that the vendor community as a whole does a very poor job of making solutions work properly for the MSP business model. I think Reg does a great job because he comes from this industry and it's natural to him and he knows exactly what he's doing. But most have no idea what they're doing. They don't understand the MSP business model. Cybersecurity as a whole, whatever the thousands and tens of thousands of cybersecurity companies out there aren't set up for MSPs. It's a very small fraction that's doing it properly. Like I like to think we are a QuickPass Fin, like it's a small subset, right? That works exactly for MSPs and built for MSP business model. In addition, bringing it back to human security, one of the biggest problems that IT has with the general public is the person or the end user feeling stupid, right? Or feeling, the classic like IT guy trope, the arrogance that comes with it. And that problem that we have, that cultural problem that we have between IT and end users that, a lot of really great MSPs have figured this out. And they're not doing this at all. I'm not accusing everyone like that. I'm saying it's 100 times worse for people who are in the security field. Security people, I come from that world, from the security vendor side. Security people are super, super, super arrogant just in general. And then if we want end users to have better security and, secure themselves, and we want security companies to work with MSPs, like we have to drop that arrogance. And that's the single that is like the factor that, like, I don't care how good you are, how good your AI is, what NSA you worked for, what,
acronym
Israeli, whatever you worked for. Like, if you are arrogant, it's not going to work. And I think that's
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's also a touching point on there with how they get that arrogant, right? There's a couple of things that I think stem from that. One of those is something that's not often talked about, is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So it's a defense mechanism to them feeling like they're not adequate enough, because security is possibly the most ever-changing landscape to ever exist, with developing technologies and methods to exploit that technology.
Except
you
Microsoft
think
licensing.
the arrogance,
Yeah.
arrogance then maybe overcompensating for like this voice in their head that's saying you're not really as good as you think you are.
Yeah, so you put on the air of confidence, and I'm better than everybody because I'm in security and I'm here,
And I'm
but
smart.
constantly nagging because something's just nagging in them. Also, it's an overinflated ego, because we are constantly going, thank God you stopped that security incident. You're the best ever. The code you wrote is perfect, right? We have those conversations. We encourage those behaviors because we know the results of them not stopping it.
Yeah.
So even if they accidentally stopped it or something that they just contributed to, we give more praise we just shower them with praise because we don't want to have to deal with a security incident, because then we got to write we got an incident response, we got to do that.
So to some
talk to
extent,
people.
we are to blame for creating the monster.
Partially,
Kyle's
I would
advocating
say.
for more sticks and less carrots. Got it.
I mean, just to balance the stick carrot scenario.
Right.
I mean, I think that's fair.
It sounds like, to summarize, right? Maybe soft skills could fix the entire industry from the ground up. I don't know. That's
100%.
I think
problem solved.
Jimmy made a really good point, though, is there's not a lot of vendors that know how to work with MSPs because their primary clients are enterprises. Just because you serve a business that has an IT department doesn't mean you can work with an MSP well. I've seen, I had no clue that existed when I first got into this industry 4 years ago. But as I'm in the industry, I can tell you when I'm at a conference at a vendor floor, just by the way the booth's organized, just by the way the people are talking with each other, there's a huge difference between companies that work with MSPs and companies that were enterprise focused and have a channel program that's an afterthought. Companies that do both and it's not an afterthought are amazing, but companies that do it as an afterthought to look a little better on the P&L end up just not serving their clients, the MSPs, very well.
I mean, I see that all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got so many vendors in MSP Geek, vendor partners in MSP Geek who hang out and chat. And I get questions all the time like, hey, so-and-so wants to come hang out in the community and they're building a channel program from enterprise. And I'm like, good luck.
Yeah.
And none of them, a lot of vendors also don't know how to interact with their communities.
Yeah.
You bring a huge issue. It's like they'll come in and they're like, buy stuff. And I'm like, that doesn't work here. That's not, people aren't going to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be sold. They want to engage. They want you to talk details. They want to be like, what tech stack you working with? Like, we're on AWS, we run React code, and they want to know the nitty gritty. And then they're like, oh, how do you solve this problem? And they want you to know details. They don't want to steal your ideas. They want to know your product works, and they want to know your product works, and they want to understand you personally. Then they'll be willing to buy from you.
If every vendor at any show would lead with, here is the problem that I solve, is that a problem you need solved this quarter or next? That would make me thrilled because there's a lot of just gobbledygook. We were talking about the tech crowd speaking in a way that their audience doesn't hear. That is apparent with the vendor community as well, is that the vendors talk about the bits and bytes and speeds and feeds, and the MSP is just going, I don't even know do you solve a problem that I have? And even if it's a problem that I have, I can't solve every problem this quarter. I have a punch list. It's not on the roadmap for this quarter. Can you just give me a little bit of space, and I'll circle back when the time is right. So I love that. Like, tell me what problem you solve, and we'll go from there.
Jimmy brought up not only does your platform need to work for MSPs, and there's a million webinars we could do on what does it mean to actually have a platform that works well for MSPs. Your business needs to work for MSPs. You need to have a community focus at some level. You need to be a part of the industry, not just keep it at arm's length. Like a lot of, people, like a lot of companies, unfortunately do. And Kyle hit on that point. It's like, you want to be involved in the community. You want to serve MSPs well. It's like, ask them the questions and give them the answers. Don't give them the sales material that your marketing department authorized for your channel program. They get enough of that. It's like when we go to events, it's like every MSP I've ever talked to has always complained about the blast of emails and text messages, and somehow mail gets sent to their business and their home address after an event for that next week. It's like that happens so often that we have to wait a week to reach out so that we don't get caught up in the noise of like what you said is like, do you have a problem this quarter, next quarter, a quarter after that? It's like, I can't even get to say that question if I'm wrapped up with that noise where they're just getting hammered with everything after a conference.
Yes. 100% true. Yeah. And we do hear that all the time. Okay. So Jimmy, you started hinting at why is securing the human so difficult? And so we've done a little bit of dodging and weaving. Some of it is because MSPs are spread very thin. Some of it is because they're not experts at education or psychology. Why else? Why do you think it is so difficult? Because maybe part of the solution stems from understanding the problem a little bit better.
Yeah. So I'd say one problem that Reg pointed out, the figuring out how to properly train your end users isn't necessarily worked into a large portion of MSP's business model. So that's, one portion of it. Two, we have, as we discussed, there is we're having IT people try to train humans, not psychiatrists trying to change humans and train behavior. And then three, the solutions that we have out in the industry, 90% of them aren't built actually for MSPs to work with small businesses. So, I don't know how to fix all three of those problems. We've got different people working on different things. We've got, shout out to Connor here working, on security awareness training.
Don't do
that. But like, I don't know. I think it's those three things as a whole, right?
Reg, anything to add there?
I think we need to recognize that this is a global issue. And I don't mean global like the planet, but we wouldn't have an obesity epidemic if we understood real effective behavioral change, and people wouldn't break the speed limit on the highway. They would understand the risks and they would make better decisions. So I think humans are a challenge in every aspect of life and society. It just so happens that our industry tends to make a lot of headlines. So I think a lot of this has already been covered, but I cringe every time I hear someone say the human firewall, because they are exact opposites, right? The firewall does exactly what you tell it to do. It does it every single time the exact same way until it crashes, but it's predictable, it's consistent, it's repeatable. It doesn't have bad Mondays. It doesn't hate its boss. It doesn't get sick. Humans are organic. And so there are endless variability to a human's behavior and their limbic system, the lizard brain, like in the way that works. And so I think we lack expertise in understanding that. But I think, again, that's a global issue. Has nothing to do with MSPs or cybersecurity firms. It's that we just generally don't understand, consistently at least, how to affect real behavioral change in human beings.
All right. Someone was going to chime in partway through that.
That's me. So Reg touched on a point that I think is probably the easiest method to at least start this change is evaluating risk. You can't judge, because a person is going to have a bad Monday. They're going to hate their boss. They're going to go through a breakup, have sad days, whatever. But you can build risk analysis on that individual person to see how effective, what kind of risk you're willing to give them. Like if they don't fall for phishing tests, if they don't plug in that USB that they got shipped to them accidentally, if they don't do risky behaviors and they're thoughtful with their methodologies and policies and they follow policy and procedure, they're less risky to the business, and that means you can give them more responsibility because it's less risky to you and allows your business to function better. But if they're extremely risky, you don't want to give them the safe code, right? Because they'll open it, they'll leave it open, and then someone walks in, takes money, and there's like, what happened? I'm like, well, I forgot to shut the safe, my bad. Right? So you can build, I think someone should build a risk analysis to be able to determine from an IT perspective how risky a person's behavior is. And I think that's doable. It's probably not going to be extremely accurate the first couple of times, but what risk analysis is.
So one of you mentioned in passing leveraging human resources and having human resources get in on the whole concept of educating humans and requiring them to up level, maybe even performing the risk assessment or assigning that as a task. Are you seeing that as an effective way to try to educate the humans, recognizing everything we've said? They are not necessarily the weakest link. They just happen to be the last link in the chain. They would never even be given a chance to click something if the other mechanisms and safety protocol in place hadn't been bypassed. But is anybody hearing stories of leveraging HR to support the concept of securing humans?
Enterprises do all the time.
Right.
your security awareness is run as initiative of your HR department because it's training humans to reduce risk and change behavior. It's like that's the whole reason HR exists, is to make sure people are doing the right things and they're happy, and there's a whole wellness about that. But if enterprises are doing it,
why don't we see that more in the MSP community? Any thoughts?
They don't,
Most
they
HR
don't
is
have
outsourced.
HR teams.
Yeah, they're
Small
outsourced.
businesses don't have HR teams. It's
Okay. I know MSPs don't, but that's a good point. If MSPs are selling to a 10-person law firm or probably even a 50-person company, they don't have an HR team. So, but somebody has that role on the org chart. But then I guess those companies are spread almost as thin as the MSPs.
Yeah. It's also a time component. Traditionally, creating, managing, and orchestrating security awareness that's actually effective, we could argue if any is actually effective, but is time intensive. Now picture an MSP is to do that with 50 companies at a time, 100 companies at a time. That's 100 QBRs they have to run, ideally, or 100 conversations they have to have on a ideally monthly or quarterly basis. It's like very quickly it becomes an unmanageable task for one centralized resource for the 100 companies that have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Jimmy, you look like you were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with them, nodding on. I mean, it's like I'm in the middle of another type of training, right? Like my yearly diversity and inclusion training, and then sexual harassment training. So with regular policies and procedures, sometimes it gets put in like the HR bucket versus the IT bucket versus the cybersecurity bucket, and it's a little unclear, where it should actually sit. I would say, people in this call would say IT and cybersecurity probably, but it's everyone's job. It's everyone's job. Security has to, see something, say something mentality. You look at the big campaigns like New York, see something, say something. You see the same things in other cities like, London or whatever. Like having people speak up and building a culture of people not to be afraid of, pointing out if there might be a security risk is the biggest thing. And that doesn't stop at IT. It involves HR as well. And that culture, it doesn't stop at phishing emails or my computer might be hacked or anything like that. Like that's culture of speaking up. If you think, an employee is being treated wrong because of, their race, religion, the color of their skin, anything like that. So I think that there is a bigger cultural factor of having employees, not scared to speak up on things and point things out. That comes a lot of it from the HR department, past just general, like, check this box, watch this training by this time. So I don't know.
It's also not engaging. That type of training is just people go to sleep. Like Connor, close your ears.
No, I
hit
talk to
the
employees that tell me
1.5
exactly what you're about to
speed
say.
button and go to something else.
You're better because most just tell me they mute it.
or maybe hit play and go get your coffee.
Because it's not engaging. Like as someone who works at an MSP, it's busy. I'm getting DMs, I'm getting emails, I'm getting questions, comments. I got thousands of things going through my mind at once, and to sit down and look at this training, I've probably already seen, heard, or understood, and to watch it again, to take the 2-question quiz, which is, do you click on that link? The answer is no. And it's just not engaging. Like, why? I don't want to use any of my attention span on it, but I have to do it because it's required.
Right.
But if it was engaging, I'd be more interested in doing it. Maybe maybe Connor, make a video game or something out of it. Like you write in JavaScript, you can make a game out of that. Just make a game.
I need a
Unity. You have to do something. Like make me have to do something so that I don't have to just click 2 times speed, mute, go do something else, right?
Right. So I can't hit play and go get my cup of coffee. Like Mario's going to run off the end of the building if I don't do something with him. Yeah,
exactly. And I can't proceed. Right. So I have to, in order to proceed, I have to do something. And if all that is taking a 2-question quiz at the end of this video that I've already seen a million times, it's not going to be effective because you may introduce new information in that video that I'm just going to completely ignore because it's not engaging. And that's one of the core problems, I think, with any SAT training tool you have now. It's just not fun. It's not.
Jen,
So Jimmy, you said something I thought that was interesting. Just to kind of wrap this up into a nice bow, you said that cybersecurity and train that there's a team mentality. It's not let's put all this pressure on the MSP and the client doesn't have to do anything, and that represents a shift in model, which is what Reg was saying early on. Is that the model is broken or is breaking because 5 years ago, 7 years ago, it was everything for the MSP. The MSP was responsible for making sure nothing broke, making sure that ad moves changes were done. And so now there is a shift that it has to be a partnership. It's not the MSP has the magic wand that can fix everything, but the MSP needs the client to come alongside and be a partner in this. That's new messaging. It's a new talk track, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes down to that same like arrogance discussion. Like if the end user's interaction when they call the MSP because they can't get PowerPoint to open is this idiot, you click the button again, I've showed you before, versus let me help you, here we pull it up, let me make sure let me reset your password for the 50th time this month, like that person is gonna reach out and say something when their mouse starts moving on their screen and it's not supposed to. Versus if every time they call into the MSP, they get a bad reaction, like they're not going to reach out. They're going to shut her up. They're going to be like, I don't want to, like, I'm not calling them.
That's great. That the tone, that the nonverbal is so important because you're really starting to train your clients for what happens when it is that very bad day. And you do want them to call. All right. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Anybody have a 1 or 2 sentence wrap up that you want to share, either a topic we didn't quite get to or something that jumped out at you from the conversation in the last hour?
I'll start.
A specific thing.
Sure.
Okay.
I think we need to do a better job of tying, regardless of who does what and what we're doing, tying it to outcomes. And there's 2 pieces here. And I think while this may be a little bit brazen to have a conversation like this with a prospect, say, hey, listen, let me know, are you interested in checking awareness boxes or are you interested in changing behaviors? Because I can only do one of those. MSPs can be successful doing that. There are plenty of tools that can help with compliance. It's on if the customer though says, hey, listen, I'm really concerned about my people's behavior and I really want something that changes my culture, then it might be time to think about a different potential solution. But we only do that by tying investments in activities to outcomes. Like what did this actually produce? And then being willing to self-assess and say, well, what I did just didn't work, or it did work, and continue to do the stuff that works and stop doing the things that don't work. And I think in awareness, there's really 2 pursuits here because the entire industry today, as far as I can tell, is really focused on the compliance aspects. So on my cyber assurance application, can I say I'm doing awareness training? It never really says, does it actually work?
Yeah.
So I think tying everything to outcomes is going to be really important.
I like that. Connor, you were going to say something?
So, I think you asked earlier, what's missing? For 25 years, training an employee to recognize things has started and stopped at an email and a training video delivered on a semi-annual, annual, monthly basis. Doesn't matter. I believe in a concept that I've dubbed human vulnerability management. And I have a direct quote from Reg that explains it perfectly. What's missing is human vulnerability management is about scraping away the videos and the posters in the bathroom and the Amazon phishing tests and getting down to exactly what vulnerabilities exist in humans. And then I have the lizard brain, the cognitive bias level. And how do we patch that so that they end up acting differently in a way that actually introduces less risk to a business? And then when I had this conversation with Reg, he laid out, what do we do to actually mitigate real vulnerability in your network or in technology? You assess the threats, you validate they exist, you prioritize certain ones, you remediate the ones that you've prioritized, and then you verify the remediation worked. Right now, for humans, we have half of the first step, assessing. Like that's currently the maturation of measuring human vulnerability is we have half of assessment, then there's no validation, there's no prioritization, there's no remediation, and then there's no, like Reg said, tying that to an outcome. It's just, did we send the fish? Did they click on it? That's half of the first step. I think that's kind of what's missing.
Okay. Jimmy, any last thoughts?
Drop the arrogance.
That's a
Jimmy
good one.
must have had some bad calls this week. We've all had it. We've all gotten it. We all know.
I'm good. The recap I'm going to give is the concept of leaning on relationships, being open and honest enough, and being able to say, I have a weakness inside of my company. This could spell the demise for some or all of my clients. I owe it to them to find a way to patch that business vulnerability, which could be your community around you. It could be the people you formerly looked at as competitors. So, gentlemen, I so appreciate your time. Absolute gold inside of this hour on trying to figure out, should, maybe we do need to stop saying humans are the weakest link and instead say humans happen to be that last layer, that last line of defense, but that doesn't make them the weakest. Making sure that our other pieces, including policies, are in place, but then looking outside of ourselves to find experts and lean on their expertise to try to raise the awareness, raise the tide, and help humans to make good decisions and good choices when the need arises. So thank you all for your time. I so appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks
We'll
for
see you.
having us.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Take care.